Hello everybody. Let's talk about the Elder Scrolls series and what made it special. Now we're going to look at Daggerfall, Morrowind, Oblivion and Skyrim here and just talk about it, for a while. Now Daggerfall was a large world of randomly generated things. It's very different from the games that came later, which were more, static in a way. Since the procedurally generated world of Daggerfall meant you could explore and explore, you'd probably never get to the end of it. And the worlds it created as well was a long walk across lands to see other cities and stuff, but you could fast travel for a small fee. But again, you had that sense of danger every time you entered anything. And trying to find your way around, there was no signposts. Well, that's a figure of speech. You had to go and figure it out for yourself. But it had that feeling, even if you only played it for an hour, you had that feeling that it was a rather special game. Now, some of the storyline from that reappears in Oblivion later on in relation to the Septims. But for the time being, since we're going to focus on Morrowind. Now, Morrowind was a very special island. You had mushroom cities of the Telvanni mages, then normal, villages, and then the pyramid cities of Vivec City, and a volcano and the barriers, and you'd go from one side of the island to the other, and it would change dramatically, and so would the creatures. And the various houses with their various alignments and conditions of having to keep them all happy. You had no choice but to learn what each house wanted and liked and become immersed in their culture. Now, with the Elder Scrolls Online released a Morrowind DLC that's supposed to have been about the time Vivec City was first started to get built, didn't quite capture it, although it was fascinating to see Vivec City being built. It always had that sense that it was too small. But the actual real Vivec City found in Morrowind, that was massive. That was good. With the fog on, you couldn't see the other side of it from one side. So, with the fog off, it was quite impressive. But the little settlements around it as well, which were different from the settlements anywhere else. And the story that people told and the missions you had to do and these little comic touches like the boots of blinding speed and things like that. This was a world that was designed to keep you riveted, and it was an epic storyline as well. Just walking around, pleasing the houses, doing all the things you're supposed to, with the dissidents and all that kind of thing. And the dissidents reappear again as the actual temple hierarchy in Solstheim, in the Solstheim mod or the Dragonborn mod, for Skyrim, because by that time, says the temple had changed, the tribunal had been swept away in favour of the dissidents. So, them dissidents became the future of Morrowind, you might say. But anyway, that Morrowind there is something you actually got into it. You felt it in your blood that it was a world worth exploring. So when you read about it much later that the Argonians had invaded and wiped most of it out, and then the tribunal had been swept away, you actually miss it. You actually feel sorry for the changes because you haven't seen any changes that have been better than what was there. Plus the Dwemer ruins as well. The Dwemer ruins were just, they're always creepy to me. They felt creepy, and you go in there and it's absolutely dangerous. Where the ones that you see in Skyrim never felt that way to me. I tried to recreate that creepy feeling in my own mods, but I never felt that the levels in Skyrim were as good as the levels in Morrowind, because in Morrowind that sense of danger remained. It was the difficulty settings, I think, set it off. But yeah, it had a very strong sense of culture in Morrowind, which you don't quite get in a lot of later games. I suppose you do from Skyrim, but I always preferred Morrowind to Skyrim and Oblivion to Skyrim. Skyrim was just the latest game that's been on the market for such a long time, because we haven't had a new Elder Scrolls game, let's face it. But anyhow, when it came to Oblivion, now I had this preconception, right, from various reviews, that when people played it, they'd just be walking down country lanes and doing quests. Turns out that's it. That's really what it was. He says Uriel Septim, linking back to the Daggerfall days, it was just like icing on the cake, you might say. But the whole thing about walking around a peaceful world, doing little side quests, visiting farms and towns and buying houses and collecting rare stuff and put it in your house and just put it on the side. That was quite interesting. It was kind of like you were part of a different world other than the one you were born in. And then, of course, the Oblivion gates start appearing and you're fighting to keep them closed. And then suddenly that world's turned into chaos. And then eventually you finish the main quest and they're gone. And this beautiful world is filled with ruins and, closed Oblivion gates. And Martin's gone, and you walk out of the Imperial City and you think everything's changed. Everything that's happened, the intense action that happened, is now gone. It's never coming back. What happens now? When I made my Elder Council mod as a thank you to my fans for their support, this was about 2008 or maybe 2007. I made it so it continue after the main plot. I did the same thing for Kavachi Aftermath and Kavachi Rising, so they all add to after the main quest. So you can actually do something once that you reach that stage. This is where you get the Radja Kryn between Breville and Leowin attacking the roads, and my later mods to update the cities like Breville and Leowin as well to make them more into what they were originally designed to be. So you had that extra depth, and the Duke of Nibelheim, who was a bad guy in my storyline. Because this all predated what we later found out about what happened. But the Elder Council mod, did introduce, the characters that would eventually become part of Elder Scrolls history. The new Emperor and things. So yeah, but I did love that sense of walking around a world that changed forever at the end of an era, where you know something's been lost and it's never coming back. Then you start, wondering what's happening tomorrow, and you see little glimpses of story. The cliff racers are gone. St. Job, I think it is, had killed them off. And, that kind of thing. And Vivix, was to later disappear, and along with Job and things like that. So the heroes were all disappearing and new ones were coming. You were hearing stories about the Somerset Isles, and all kinds of stuff. So at the end of the day, he was laying the foundations again for the next game, but didn't introduce as much lore as Morrowind did. So it was still living off the Morrowind lore, but it did make you feel part of that world, and it did make you feel like you were actually, influencing the world, and you did. Statues in Broome proved it, at the end of it. But I got the feeling that, if you focus on the plot becomes all the game was. But the game was always more than that. I don't think Oblivion could be played properly by focusing mainly on quest lines. I think you had to solo it, just go out there and make your own adventure in order to really benefit from Oblivion. But it remains one of my favourite Elder Scrolls games, although I never felt that at the time. I look back with fond memories today. Now, if you look at Skyrim, when that came out, even since with dragons and stuff, it always felt a bit generic to me, although it was a really good game with really good worlds and really good combat and fluid animations and things. There's not really anything to say it's bad. It just doesn't feel as good as Oblivion to me. So I played through it. I mean, I've never really been into that Nord culture anyway, so it wasn't really me. So when I was playing it, I'd play through it. But you got the same feeling as Morrowind and Oblivion when you're exploring the world and you're going around just delving into dungeons and things. You had that same sense of thing. It just didn't seem to have as much variety in the world space as you did get in Morrowind. But I mean, you look at, say, Oblivion, that had even less variety in the world. So, but anyway, Skyrim was good. I mean, you go down near Riften, you get to that vampire area where drugs are found in that little burnt-out hut and things like that. There was a lot to find, lots to explore. But I only really started getting into that when the Dragonborn DLC was released. At that point, Dark Elves, Raven Rock, Solstheim, that really appealed to me. I was saying most of my characters have been Dark Elf archers, and one of the first things I do, as soon as it's possible, is go straight over to Solstheim and build my character there, and then come back to Skyrim. So, I mean, I used to play Nordic barbarians and things, and Orc barbarians, but I tend to like to change my characters around. I kind of like to mix it up a little bit. Sometimes I'll be a pure necromancer, sometimes a pure mage, sometimes a pure warrior, sometimes a really heavy barbarian, and I'd go full on when it comes to the skill sets for that. I always found that eventually you max out about level 40, 42-ish, something like that. And once you get beyond that, you're starting to dilute your character a bit. So I used to stop playing at that point. But the Skyrim itself was always a rich world in itself. But I always got the feeling that each of the cities was a bit temporary. There wasn't much going on there. It was all, yeah, just go there, do this, kill a dragon, leave. I never did like these repeat quests, like you have to close 6 Oblivion gates. You have to go around all the houses and get their approval to be never there. I never liked that kind of quest. But I always thought that it did set things up. It introduced you to each city properly and each world properly. So you had to do things properly. And that's one of the things I really liked about, the quests, for Morrowind and Oblivion. And I hated it at the same time. It was a bit tedious to keep going around it over and over again. And Morrowind's was harder because there was less signposting and more exploration involved. So you could never quite remember exactly where you had to go. And then when you did come across the data like Zora and things like that, and you delved into that, it was quite interesting in Morrowind days. It became a bit standardised in Oblivion. And I don't think it was a major feature of Skyrim, really. They were there, but that's all you can really say. The idea of collecting all the Daedric artifacts and stuff and using them, it only seems to work that well if you didn't enchant your own weapons and didn't focus on certain types of characters. Once you've actually built your character, power built your character to be a power mage or a warrior or whatever, they don't always work that well for you. They tend to be a bit of a letdown. Although there are some weapons that do come out, decent eventually anyway. Anyway, since we're going to come to Skyrim and Raven Rock, though, the Raven Rock was always my favourite. You go down, you get the Ebony man going again, and then you start dealing, with the original Dragonborn, the first Dragonborn. I mean, that storyline, and I can't remember his name, Oculus, the data involved there with the books and stuff. I always liked the powers he gave you more than the actual shouts you got from Skyrim. I always felt like that was more of a lore thing than just going up to a dragon and killing it and finding a shout. I mean, don't get me wrong, I enjoyed the shouts. I'd really love some like the Fus Raw shout, in other games, so I can just blow enemies off cliffs and things. And it's like in Just Cause 2, with the I can't recall it now, grappling hook. That's another thing I'd like to have in every game. So the grappling hook and Fuss Raw, that'd just be an excellent game. That would be. But anyway, so the Dragonborn DLC thing, it made the difference to me, especially the Skyrim side of things. It made Skyrim worth playing. That was a bit like, that was my Fallout New Vegas for Skyrim, you might say. Skyrim itself was alright. It was a big world to explore. You could do an awful lot in it. But it was the Dragonborn DLC itself that drew me in, because it was the roots to Morrowind that made it special. It was that link that between Morrowind and future Elder Scrolls games that gave it a history, and I think that history is lacking a little bit in Skyrim, and maybe a little. Well, it isn't lacking in Oblivion. In Oblivion, it's there because you get a chance to taste the world before it disappears forever with Martin Septim and a new world is replaced by it. Then in Skyrim, when you look back, you do get an idea of what happened after that, because it's in books and everything else, and novels. So you find out, that there was a new emperor, have a weak one, the Falmor invaded and all that kind of thing. That all comes to light. So you look back at Oblivion and thinking, this world's soon to disappear. So when you play through it again, that at the end of the fourth era, end of the fourth era, third era, that's it. It's gone. It's now not going to be the same ever again. Hammerfell's going to secede from the Empire because the Emperor just basically gave it to the Falmor, and then they beat the Falmor. So there's an awful lot gone on. But with Skyrim, though, you're not really getting that feel, that historic feel about it all. So you might get that feeling about it when you actually get to the end of the main plot. But again, I think it's it's there in the Dragonborn DLC more than anywhere else. Anyway, I liked all the games. They all had something different, but I think it's that sense of the end of an era you get at the end of the Oblivion plotline that gives it such a strong, feeling of achievement and loss. And at the same time, when you look at the Morrowind games, you go all the way around it and you achieve it. You don't really feel a loss there, but you feel like you now know what the people of Morrowind represent and what they're into, what they like, their culture. So you've learnt about their culture playing that game. Whereas on the Oblivion one, you don't really learn the culture. You just learn, about Daedra and the Septims and things like that. Skyrim, it's all nod, 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 and it never really interested me until we got the Dragonborn DLC. The idea that the Dark Elves were not liked in Windhelm was actually quite an interesting spin for me. I always thought, that could have been much richer and deep. In fact, it's one of the areas, as a mod, it's one of the areas I normally like to just fill. And I did fill it, to a degree in my Windhelm mod, which sadly got a bit corrupted, so had to be scrapped. But I did fill it at that point, and I did feel, that I could have done more to it if it wasn't for the fact that the mod had become corrupt. Because that happens sometimes when you're modding. The mod corrupts, you don't notice it until you've already made several versions, and then suddenly someone says it won't boot the game. That's it, it's dead. So... But anyway, yeah, that's my thoughts on the Elder Scrolls series. Hope you've enjoyed it. You tell me what you think. I always felt that sense of achievement and loss was the most important aspect of the Elder Scrolls. The thing that kept me coming back. That and the fact I could play any character I liked. I always liked mixing the characters up. So anyway, you tell me what you think. Mate, see you in the next one.